All right, if everyone's ready, we're going to call the session, City Council session of May 6th to order. And here we go. Please join me in the flag salute. There's Councilor Giulio now. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All members of the governing body are present. Are there any announcements or additions to the agenda, declaration of ex-party contacts, conflict of interest, bias, etc.? None. Opportunity for public comment. The council will now receive public comment. We value the time and initiative members of the public take to share their thoughts with the council. The council's role during public comment is not to immediately respond, but to listen. If there is a follow-up necessary, we will direct city staff to do so. Remember that we all model the way of our community, and we ask that everyone share their thoughts respectfully. Those who have completed a request for recognition form will be called one at a time to step forward or turn on their cameras and mics and state their name and address. Please note that speakers will have 3 minutes to express their thoughts. And with that, Adam, come on up.
Make sure the green button is on when you.
My name is Adam Culbertson, owner of Homegrown Remedies, as well as a board member of Revitalize Downtown Stayton. One of my businesses is located at 277 North 3rd Avenue in the heart of historic downtown Stayton. Parking has become an issue in the downtown area over the past couple of years, and it seems to only continue to get worse. A large part of the problem is that our downtown area does not have any time limit parking signs. I would like to see the city place 3-hour time limit parking signs downtown, as I think it would help curb the issue of folks parking for excessive amounts of time along 3rd Avenue. I would also like to ask that a 30-minute parking sign be placed in the parking space directly in front of my business. We would be willing to foot the cost for that sign. I have a considerable amount of medical patients as well as elderly and handicapped folks that have trouble walking long distances to get to my store, so a majority of them have chosen our curbside pickup option. OLCC wants this process to happen directly in front of our business under our camera coverage, and if not possible, at a maximum distance within 150 feet of our entrance on our side of the street. I have met with OLCC on site and discussed the lack of parking issue and not being able to meet their criteria all the time. They have given us grace for the time being due to our unique location and parking issues that go with it. However, the first thing the agent said was that he thought it was odd that there are no parking limit signs, which obviously exacerbate the parking issue. I'm asking the council to take a close look at the issue and to please take action ASAP. This issue harms all downtown retail businesses that are simply struggling to survive. I don't think anybody wants to see our downtown core go back to the ghost town it once was 10 years ago. The business owners of downtown, as well as the folks with Revitalized Downtown Stayton, have worked very hard to create the core we currently have. And the last thing we need is to have that progress damaged due to something so simple to remedy. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. I do have a clarifying question for you. Are you saying that OLCC is mandating you to do this?
So OLCC, if you're allowed curbside pickup, which was something that developed during COVID, and they've just continued to allow it. And it is very helpful for people that can't get out of their car and that have different ailments. But they do want it to be done in front of our cameras, in front of our store. And it's obviously not always possible. And so they said, you know, the maximum distance is within 150 feet of the door if we can't do that. So it still needs to be on our side of the street within 150 feet, but then you run into security issues. Our cameras don't go 150 feet each direction. They kind of cover the 2 parking places in front of our business. And so it'd be really helpful if there was a way for us to turn the parking spot directly in front of our store into a 30-minute parking, like you see in some different places in different towns. But yeah, they're willing to give us grace right now, but they said it's something we need to work on, and part of the reason why I'm here.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Al. Anybody else? Okay, doesn't look like it. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda, which includes the April 15th City Council work session minutes, April 15th City Council regular session minutes, April 29th City Council work session minutes, and resolution number 1104, directing and authorizing the submittal of a grant to the Oregon State Marine Board and authorizing the signing of a contract with Marion County for the use of ARPA funds. What would council like to do?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Councilor Patty.
Oh, excuse me there. I did have a couple questions about resolution number 1104. I'm happy to ask them of staff during consideration of the consent agenda, but if the rest of the council would prefer, I'm happy to just remove that from consent agenda if that would be the preference.
So I'll just chime in. So the consent agenda, there really isn't any conversation. So if you want to
Right.
discuss it, then take it off.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess I move that we remove resolution number 1104 from the consent agenda.
Removal of the consent agenda doesn't require a vote. If anybody wants it removed, it comes off.
Correct.
So
Okay, thank you.
So we'll remove letter D from the consent agenda. So what would council like to do with letters A, B, and C of the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Council Ort?
I move that we accept the agenda with A, B, and C as presented.
Okay,
Seconded. Thank you.
okay. Been moved and seconded to accept the consent agenda minus letter D, which is resolution 1104, which we'll speak to after this. All those in favor say aye, or sorry, further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Julia, when would you like to do resolution 1104?
that is up to you. We can either do it before the general business resolution 1101 or at the end, which
So can we do it now? Let's do it now. Councilor Patty?
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. So I was just kind of curious about this. Based on my, review of this report, and I'm sorry for not getting this question to you earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and preface it with that. Is it traditional for the county to condition this for a municipality on this application for this grant funding?
So I guess I'd start by saying there is no traditional, because this is it's a little bit of a one-off anyways. There's been a lot of back and forth with this particular grant, and the county lost the grant manager that I had been working with, and to try to get it back on track, this was the recommendation of, this was kind of through the work session, there was some desire that, we committed that we would apply for that Marine Board grant. And so they have just recommended that we just get council's formal direction to staff to apply for it. And so that's what's before you. And then also, just to save time, I also asked you to authorize me to sign any contract documents to move that, the ARPA grant forward. So I can't say it's traditional, but it's not out of the question.
Okay. And then I guess my next question is about the fiscal impact statement here. How much staff time do you think that's going to require to do that?
That's a good question. I actually have an email to somebody at the Marine Board, because I started to kind of pull it together. It's a little confusing, and there's several different grant paths, and so I don't know right now how easy it will be. I'm hoping it will be a fairly straightforward process, but I'm not 100% certain, because it looks like there could be some federal. It looks like it could be complicated, but I honestly don't know to apply for the grant. Sorry.
No, that's fine. And this is kind of my concern. If this is an onerous restriction from us being able to use these federally directed dollars, I don't understand why the Marion County is holding this up. Is there any other clarification you can provide at this time?
No. I think that when we had the work session with the county commissioners, that was the recommendation. That's what their staff heard was, we'll give the city the money for their projects, but we also encourage you to apply for this grant. If you get the grant, then the funds that you would have spent on the funds that you get the grant for, you could spend on other elements in the park. And so that's sort of what the understanding was, and that's my understanding of what the county staff heard needs to happen or needs to be sort of assured in order to move forward for us to receive these funds.
Okay. Well, I'm not necessarily opposed to this resolution in totality, but I will say I do not appreciate this infringement of local control in our city.
Councilor Patty, I think I want to make a distinction, I think, and I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think the concern was that it was a duplication of efforts, i.e. boat ramps, for us having one on our side and then having the Lynn County side. And we were trying to make the distinction that it's totally different, that we're not talking about having a backup boat ramp like on Lynn County side for drift boats, et cetera. We were actually talking about incorporating this into the plan of the Riverfront Park and actually having a location to bring your kayak down to the river. And I think the suggestion was, well, hey, do you know that the Oregon State Marine Board has this funds available from a grant perspective? And so that's what they encouraged us to do. So,
Thank you for that clarification, Mayor.
okay. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Giglio?
Yeah, I would say I think that it seems to be a little bit out of the ordinary, but I will say in terms of like us getting, I know that there was a little bit of a delay on our side in getting what we wanted to them. I know that they initially were actually, even the ARPA was initially intended for the wilderness park stuff and that kind of stuff. So I just feel like what I just got from the meeting just generally was a sense that we can maximize dollars by ensuring that, I think what they were just wanting to see is like, and I feel like this way too, if I was giving a grant and I saw an opportunity to maximize the dollars going further by applying for another grant and then allowing that money to go even further, I wouldn't call it like an onerous restriction. I would call it a bit unique, but I think that's where it was coming from. But I do understand your concern. I do think it's a little out of the ordinary, but I think with that in mind, I'm willing to support this resolution.
Thank you, and I think I agree with you. It is definitely unique. I guess what I'm trying to say here is I would have appreciated just the recommendation to do that and the assistance to do that with the grant, not conditioning the funds on it, and I truly do think that is onerous.
Thanks, Councilor Patty. Anybody else? Okay, with that said, what would the council like to do?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve resolution number 1104.
Seconded.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve resolution 1104, directing and authorizing the submittal of a grant to the Oregon State Marine Board and authorizing the signing of a contract with Marion County for the use of ARPA funds. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Ort.
I believe in that meeting, several of the commissioners said that they would write us a letter of support and suggested that we try to get one from the sheriff's office too, explaining how it would help boat safety and along those lines. So I see where they're, where the condition is, but also I see where the help is too. So it's kind of both.
So noted. Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Any presentations, Julia? No?
No.
Public hearing? None. General business. Resolution number 1101, authorizing city manager to sign safety action plan grant agreement. Jennifer?
Yes, I'm Jennifer Siciliano, the Community and Economic Development Director, and before you is a resolution asking for authorizing the city manager to execute a grant agreement with the Federal Highway Administration for Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. So this grant was applied for earlier before I was here, and it is a $150,000 project where $120,000 is paid for by Federal Highway Administration, and the city is proposing a $30,000 match. The program is to look at the city streets and do safety action plan, which looks at fatalities or accidents of significance, and plan for crosswalks or more safe infrastructure. And this program is actually a two-phase program, so this is the first phase of it. It requires you to do the safety action plan, and then there's an opportunity to get more grant funding to implement those action items that you find out that you need. In addition, the match was $30,000, so as part of the process, they want a group of volunteers to form a committee to get together. So I thought that the city could use in-kind match of $5,000 worth, so it would only be $25,000 a match. The timeline of the action plan will be for us to put out an RFP for a consultant, probably a transportation engineering / planning consultant, and we anticipate it probably would take a year from getting a consultant and doing an action plan. Like I said, requires a committee to form and to get input from the local residents, and then we can have the draft, and then there would be time to finalize it, and then it would be brought before the city council to fully adopt it. And then hopefully we will be done by November 2025, and from then we can apply for additional funds.
Thanks, Jennifer. This is another opportunity for public comment on Resolution 1101. Okay, Council, any questions for Jennifer? Councilor Hort, go ahead.
Jennifer, so the committee that would be put together, is that going to be a separate committee, or do you plan to use like our planning commission, or?
I think that it would be up to the city council to appoint people,
Okay.
and they did suggest that if anybody was affected by a fatality or a severe accident, to be part of that, which kind of makes sense about, but yeah, we could talk about that.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor Hort.
So would we be able to use the data that we used for, because we've already done a study on Shaft Road.
Mm-hmm.
Is that information, are we allowed to use that, or does that go towards it? Can we use those findings
Yes.
to get grant money for that project that we were talking about?
So I believe the transportation master plan was done in 2019, and they did have fatality information that they used to apply for this grant. So they would probably have more updated information.
Oh, I was just going to refer to, I think you're referring to the Shaft third one that Lance recently spoke about.
Yes.
I think certainly the information from that will be shared with whomever is selected as the consultant for this project. Separately, Lance has also been working on applying for Safe Routes to School grant funds, which is through Oregon. We're getting lots of grants.
They're not even the same thing.
They're not the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so Safe Routes to School is through Oregon, and I believe we have applied, we have applied for funding for that project, so we'll find out. But whatever the information from that study will certainly be shared. I'm sure that the consultants, as part of the first part of any project, is they look at all the background documents, what you already have information on, and I'm sure that will be part of that. But the Safe Streets for All is a federal program, so that would be opening us up for federal dollars.
Okay, cool.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Sims.
Jennifer, the in-kind staff and volunteer time,
Is that just the time that's the staff, I guess the cost of staff time to put into this grant?
It also can be used for volunteer time. So when you're on the board for the Safety Committee Action Board, you can use everybody's volunteer time. I've done that with other grants as well. So for instance, City Council, if you were to go to a meeting, all the volunteers, if it was, say, an hour-long presentation, you could use that as in-kind time. So that's what I was thinking.
Oh, okay, but they're not getting paid for it, it's just, you're taking credit for it?
Right, it's instead of getting cash from the general fund, you're getting in-kind time from volunteers and for staff. So when I will work on this, then I'll use that, I'll take that time to pay for this grant.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Jennifer, it might be too early, but do we know if it's all roads or just within the city limits, or do we know?
It's within the city limits,
Okay.
and it will be focused on the city's roads, not the county roads.
Okay,
That's how,
so that would exclude golf course, probably? Okay. Anybody else? What would council like to do?
Mr. Mayor,
Council Ort?
I'd like to move that we approve Resolution 1101, authorizing the city manager to execute a grant agreement with the Federal Highway Administration for a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to approve resolution number 1101, authorizing the city manager to sign Safety Action Plan Grant Agreement. Further discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Council Ort?
I would just like to say that I didn't realize that they were separate programs, and I'm really excited that we are finding avenues to really help with our grant process. So thank you for doing this, and the one that Lance is doing. This is really awesome.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. That leads us to resolution number 1102, Ida Street Sewer Phase 2 contract approval. Lance?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tonight, I bring before you Resolution 1102, awarding a contract for the West Ida Street Sewer Replacement Project, Phase 2. Last year, we performed Phase 1 of this project. This project was identified in the 2020 master plan that was adopted by the City Council in 2021. The Ida Street basin is severely undersized and limits our ability to develop in town, in the downtown corridor, as well as east of town, which is the primary source of residential housing. Phase 1 was constructed last year. We got a $500,000 ARPA grant from Marion County to help with that. This year, we put this out to bid several weeks ago. We had 3 bidders. The Saunders Company of Newburgh was the low bidder at $2.72 million. I'm sorry, yeah, $2,758,888,000. They were the low apparent bidder. We had an engineer's estimate of, which was really good. We're getting very close. $2,758,800. Oh, bear with me. Our engineer's estimate was, crikey, $2,797,743. So we were within 4 or 5% of the actual bid. Very good. It was a very good, close estimate. We reached out and spoke with not only several cities that the Saunders Company has worked for, including Newburgh, Mount Angel. I personally, my former partner, had worked with them at the city of Newburgh for over 15 years, glowing recommendations for them. And we spoke to the contractor themselves to ask, what kind of resources you're going to put forward this project. They sold themselves very good. Nothing but glowing recommendations for these folks. So with that, our staff recommends that we award a contract to the Saunders Company of Newburgh in that amount. And so we're recommending council approve Resolution 1102. And with that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
Thanks, Lance. Another opportunity for public comment on resolution number 1102. Okay, council discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Giglio.
this is just a point of clarification. I think I know the answer to this. I was just double checking. So this doesn't include, this is not like this is everything underneath the surface and then patching the asphalt. And then there's like a separate project that would be then if you were to pave above this.
No,
Or,
no.
Or is this cover
We have
all
two
that?
projects going on Ida Street. Maybe you're confused
Okay.
there. So the one I brought before council several weeks ago was for the actual, we're installing a water line, a
Okay.
new master planned water line from First Avenue to Fourth Avenue on the east side of town. And then we'll be paving, milling, and overlaying that and reconstructing one block. So that's really a paving project, although we're upsizing the capacity of the water line downtown so we can fight fires if there is a fire. This project is a sewer pipe, and it's underneath the ground, and it starts right down by the Norpac Field down on Ida Street, and we're going to take it up to Evergreen, and then north on Evergreen to the Salem Ditch Bridge. That's what this phase is, phase 2. It'll conclude the priority 1 project of the master plan, and then we can move on to others that we're currently in design with.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Lance, I have a question.
Certainly.
Do we always have to take the lowest bid?
ORS is say you pretty much do, but we have the ability to not take the lowest bid. I mean, council can tell me, no, we don't want this. I think we would get pushback, and I think you'd probably want to reach out to our city attorney and get his legal opinion on that before we did that.
No, it's just a discussion we had in the past, and it correlates to what we asked about time about local versus outside, and you explained that last time, so just asking.
It's a pretty good, we looked at that, that's a pretty good chunk of change that we'd be asking our citizens to pay if we wanted to use a local company. 300 grand's significant amount of money when we know this company does good work.
Yep,
And
I'm not-
really, Newburgh is what? Well, we can ask the chief, she lives there, so 30-minute drive, 40-minute drive.
It's not questioning the local, I'm asking a general question about how the bid process is awarded,
Yeah.
so.
I think you'd have to have a really good reason to
You do.
not, so if, for instance, the other firm that had done the first part, if they had bid and been the lowest bidder, then we might have been able to have reasons to not award it to them.
It just goes back to the question, I think our last meeting you discussed it, about being an out-of-state bidder versus local. That's where I'm coming from, so.
Fortunately, these three were all local. Fortunately, they were all very good firms, so we just, the firm from, and we called the Saunders Company, since there was $300,000 left on the table, and made sure that they're aware of, you're leaving 300 grand on the table, are you comfortable with that? And they were more than comfortable with
Okay.
that, so.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Ort?
To that vein, is this, so when you're saying, do we always take the lowest bidder? I feel like we've talked about this before, where you make sure that we're comparing apples to apples
Oh, yeah.
and comparisons, and if someone is lower, is there a reason? Are you leaving something out? When we went to that conference back in October, I was talking with a company that builds play structures, and she was saying that there is a competitor of theirs that always bids really low and then has to come back and say, oh, well, I do a la carte things and add things on. So I know that there's things to look out for there, but I
Yeah,
assume that you're doing
well,
your
it's-
due diligence.
What I'll say is our engineer is they're very good, very thorough. They've been in the business for a long time. They do millions and millions of dollars of engineering designs annually. They work from Oregon, Idaho, Washington, California, with municipalities as well as private. They do millions of dollars of work a year. They know what they're doing when they design this. We had 4 engineers on the team while we designed it. We spent 9 months designing this project. We're very thorough with our design. When we put the bid tab together, identifying what needed to be built, we all went through it, we vetted it, we felt very comfortable with it, which is why our engineer's estimate is so close to the actual bid.
Awesome.
We feel comfortable with it, which is why I'm before you tonight recommending the resolution passage.
Fair enough.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Patty.
Thank you. This is just kind of gee whiz, and I'm just curious about your thoughts on this so I can better understand what's going on here. Lance, as far as the line items, it looked like our bid for the traffic control was significantly less than all these other guys, and then even Saunders was almost double what we thought it would be. I'm just curious for that, because the ultimate question I have is, why did North Santiam paving come in so high compared to that total? I don't know, just gee whiz.
Well, here's the gee whiz answer to that, Counselor. When you get into the world of bidding construction projects, a lot of different firms have a lot of different methodologies to get work. Some of them like to hide their profits in mobilization because they can get them up front. Some of them will hide it in traffic control, for example, and not put money into traffic control, and others will put it there. There's different methods to their madness when they're bidding on projects. That's what I'll say. I've seen a variety of different ways of hiding how they're going to get their profit. Some firms need that profit right up front, which is why they hide it in mobilization, because after the second month, they're getting 100% of that mobilization. And then they'll take it less down the road for actually putting pipe in the ground or something like that. So why exactly North Santiam is so much higher than the others, I don't know. I'd have to get them in a room and talk to them about it. That's really what it boils down to.
I appreciate just the candor there. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Orr.
I would like to move that we award the contract to the Saunders Company for the contract amount of $2,758,888.
Mr. Mayor, this Councilor Petty seconded.
Okay. We have a
I'm
motion.
Sorry, just to clarify, I think that might be what was in the resolution. I think you probably want to actually move that you adopt the resolution. Sorry, and I'll make sure I'm looking at that when I'm
sorry.
in the future with your
Okay.
staff reports.
Isn't it say that? I'm sorry. I thought it
does.
should say resolution.
Oh, I was just looking at the
1102.
options.
Motion to
Oh,
adopt
okay.
resolution 1102. That's in the motion. It's not under the option now.
Yep.
My apologies.
Okay, you can
Oh,
restate
I
it.
see.
Okay, let me restate that. Where am I at?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Look at the the motion. It'll tell you exactly. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm on the wrong
I'll
page.
go ahead and withdraw my second, I guess.
Sorry.
Withdraw my
Do you mind
motion.
if I can just do
Go
it?
ahead and do it. I can't find the page.
Yeah, this is Councilor Giglio. I move that we adopt resolution number 1102, awarding a contract for the construction of West Ida Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement Phase 2 project to the Saunders Company.
Seconded.
Okay. We have a motion to adopt Resolution 1102, awarding a contract for the construction of the West Ida Street Sanitary Sewer Replacement Phase 2 project to the Saunders Company. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. That moves us to resolution number 1103, budget adjustments. Repeal resolution number 1081. Mr. Brand.
Good evening. For the record, James Brand, Finance Director for the city. Resolution 1103 it does a couple of things. It is the end of the year, so we're taking a look at all the funds and seeing if we need to make any adjustments, and we did in one case. So we are adding $15,000 to the streetlight budget. It is a single line appropriation, and the contingency is within the general fund. So we are going to move $15,000 from the general fund contingency to the streetlight budget. The reason for this is kind of hard to say. I think the budget was probably set a little too low last year, but these are charges that PGE has for our streetlights, including some of the traffic signals, and we pay what's on the bill, and the bill has gone up a bit, but that was probably maybe unforeseen when the budget was built last year, so that's all I can explain for that part of it. The second part of this is fixing a previous resolution, and this was moving the ARPA money that we decided to use, some of which for stormwater projects, $300,000, and then $622,000 for wastewater project. And the money was unappropriated at the beginning of the year. And you're not allowed to appropriate what was unappropriated at the beginning of a budget year, unless there's an emergency, which is not this case. So you really can't touch that unappropriated, those funds. That was done originally because we didn't know what we wanted to do with the ARPA money at the time, and it probably should have been put in a contingency or reserve for future expenditure rather than not appropriated. So what that means is we can't use that money for those projects this year. The good news is those projects extend into next fiscal year, so we can still use the money for those projects, and that's how we've built the budget that you're receiving today. So the budget for next year will include using these ARPA monies as intended in the Resolution 1081. It doesn't slow down the project or affect the timing whatsoever. It's just that we can't use it technically this fiscal year, and so we've rebudgeted it for next fiscal year. And
Okay, so it's just a housekeeping item, essentially.
yes.
Okay. This is an opportunity for public comment for Resolution 1103. Okay, council, any questions for James?
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Council Ort.
So is it that you can't exceed 15% of the total appropriations, or you can't? Because the reason I'm asking that is because I feel like I remember when we were talking about the budget last year and we wanted to pull funds. I'm going to look at you because I feel like this was during a time when you wanted to pull funds.
Yeah.
So we wanted to pull funds from unappropriated, but I feel like we were told, well, you can do that later.
That's an unrelated matter. I think you can make budget adjustments within 15% of the budget without
Okay.
going to the full committee, I believe.
Yes, but what you're saying is this amount exceeded the 15?
No,
No,
it's not
okay.
related to that. Yeah, it's because when the budget for fiscal year '24 was put together, these ARPA funds were unappropriated.
Okay.
We intended to spend them later on a project that we would identify later, so we decided to not appropriate them at this time. But you cannot appropriate unappropriated funds during the year unless it's an emergency, by definition of how the municipal budgets work.
Okay.
It was an oversight at the time, and I can't say, I think it was recommended by Summer Sears, our consultant at the time, and that's just kind of the understanding that was made during the committee, but it's not how you are able to do things.
Okay. So maybe I need a little bit of a refresher on how that works then, because am I understanding right that the unappropriated funds are not currently part of our budget? It's like a amount of money that we can only pull from when we're doing our budget. Then after that, those funds are no longer available unless it's an emergency. But we have money in our budget that is maybe that's the difference, in contingencies.
Yes.
So this money, instead of being unappropriated, should have been put in a contingency?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I know
There
I'm
you
not the
go.
only one that didn't understand that, okay? This gets a little confusing, guys.
Yep. Anybody else have questions for James?
I do have a question.
Go ahead.
Another question. So the 11 million that we have, that we have in unappropriated funds, is that the money, like, we are obligated to keep separate, like by state limits and whatever the federal limits are. Like we have to keep so much money set aside for emergencies, or like are those funds have to have a limit on them? Is that what that money is?
It's basically excess revenues over time. So
Okay.
it's money in the bank. When we build the budget, we do have to set some contingencies and some reserves for working capital, like 60 days or
Okay.
30 days, depending on the fund. So what's left after that is what's unappropriated. So we budget the expenses that we think we'll have, and most funds have a contingency. Some have a debt service reserve, and then some have a working capital reserve. And after that, whatever's left is not appropriated. That's part of that 11 million.
Then that sits in our accounts
It's in the bank
to be
earning
used,
interest.
yeah, to be
it's
used for
Future years.
future years and/or emergencies.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, wait, I do have another question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is a third of our whole budget. Isn't our budget about 33 million? I haven't looked at that yet. It's approximately. Is that a normal thing to have so much money in unappropriated funds? And compared to, I guess, other cities, like 30%.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a normal thing?
I really can't answer that. Yeah, having been in the position a year,
Sure.
can't really speak to that.
Mr. Mayor?
Counselor Sims, go ahead.
James, I just want to make sure I understood this. So this $200,000 that eventually goes to the street fund, it's going from unappropriated to the general fund, and then it's going from the general fund to the street fund? Is that how?
Yes, so that's the part of this that I didn't speak to, but that was part of what was agreed to in the committee, and was part of this resolution that's being rescinded. But that part was done correctly, so because we rescinded the resolution 1085, we're including that in the new resolution. So that was the additional 200,000 added to the street fund from the general fund
Okay.
during the committee decision.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Gilio.
not directly related to this, but kind of related to Councilor Orr's question, is that maybe just a question we could get answered heading into the budget to see kind of what a common unappropriated amount is?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. I think that, I think a third is fairly normal, and I think that there's also some policy, and when you get into my budget message and kind of the story, I guess I want to make sure that we're telling is that we want to make sure that we're not, if we do spend money out of the unappropriated, that we're not doing it for ongoing costs, that it's more one-time costs. So just kind of keeping that in mind. But we can certainly look at, or try to look at what other jurisdictions have. It's not always as transparent as you would hope it would be, so we'll look. And James, that 11 million, is that general? That's not general fund, that's total?
It's all funds.
Yeah, so that's
There's-
the difference too, is like where we're at with our general fund versus other funds.
There's a lot of SDCs in there as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Mayor,
Counselor Gilio.
I'll move to adopt Resolution 1103, adopting changes to the fiscal year 24 budget and repealing Resolution number 1081.
I'll second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to adopt resolution number 1103 for budget adjustments and repealing resolution number 1081. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Mr. Brand, third quarter financial update.
Yes. So the results are in for the third quarter. The format's basically the same. I've tweaked it a little bit again. I also added projections this time around since we're so close and we have projections as part of the budget process. So we can talk about that too. There's also some bar charts. So first I'll talk about the red highlighted numbers, as that's usually what's most curious. In the revenues for the current budget year, overall 75%, which is right on target. A couple things are low. The transfers are low as compared to budget, and most of that is due to the SDCs that we transfer at the end of the year. So none of those have been transferred yet. The intergovernmental category is undercollected, mostly because we have some grants in there that just we haven't really, we get reimbursed from those after spending the funds, and these two projects in there really just haven't taken off yet. One is the HUD downtown grant, and another is the aquifer storage recovery. So those projects are planned for a little bit later. So those won't be spent this year, nearly to what they were budgeted. The local gas tax is a little undercollected. And then fines and forfeitures, we've gone over that one. It's a result of House Bill 4210 from 2020 that has $62,000 in write-offs this year and a few from last year as well. And then in the expenditure category, just that one red number, and that's the streetlights, which we just covered. Well, with the budget transfer, that would go green, and we would have enough funding. A couple categories are pretty low in their spending, and one is the mayor city council budget, and that will be caught up by the end of the year. That's due to the neighborhood improvement grants, so those are coming in. We're starting to pay out some of those now. The water fund is underspent, and that's aquifer storage recovery project that's projected for next year. And the stormwater fund is also pretty well underspent, and that's because the stormwater master plan hasn't begun yet, and the capital project, that the Ida Street project. So those we end up budgeting, not knowing if we're going to do those projects or not, and then we've rebudgeted them for next year at this point. So overall, the city's projected to collect about 95% of its budgeted revenues and spend 86% of its budgeted expenditures. And both of those, kind of the theme here is that they're kind of related, and that's because some projects, grants, just haven't come to fruition this year or not fully, and so those are rebudgeted again next year. Finally, I do like to add information about our team, our finance team. I wanted to talk a little bit about Elizabeth Baldwin before I turn it over for questions. So I put three words down here again, and they are local, servant, and Dumbledore. Elizabeth is a local, by definition, born and raised in Stayton, Lyons area, graduate of Stayton High. She moved away for 17 years, but then she came back to Stayton like some other people. Raised her 4 children here. She's been with the city since the year 2000, making her the 4th longest standing employee. She served in many roles, including cashier, receptionist, utility billing, accounts receivable, and court clerk. She's currently half-time court clerk and half-time accounts receivable, and she's a leader. She's a leader in her local church as well. So, when you're building a sports team, you want that veteran that's been around and can do a little bit of everything, and that's what Elizabeth is on our team. She's got a lot of historic knowledge of the city and a lot of the customers that come in the door, talk on the phone. So she's able to have a lot of wisdom and share that with the rest of the team. So I wanted to point her out to you. But I would be happy to answer any questions on the third quarter update.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Patty.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and say thanks, first off, James, for explaining some of this. I appreciate it. I don't think I have any questions at this time. I also just want to shout out to Elizabeth and say she's an excellent servant in this community, and I really appreciate her. I see her going above and beyond in ways as far as answering citizens' questions online and social media. And, you know, I just wanted to say it's really cool to see somebody just taking an initiative like that and just helping people solve problems. That's really cool.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Giglio.
Yeah, I just want to thank you as well. I think this is fantastic. I love seeing these reports every quarter. I did have one area, especially it was on the projections that I had a question about. It was the expenditures under general operations that seemed to be 72% of what was budgeted for, at about $400,000 less than it was budgeted for. I was just wondering kind of what the reason was for that.
General operations is kind of one of those weird categories, but most of it is transfers out. So it has the general fund subsidies for parks, pool, and the library. Those are on track. So I know that those are at 75% now and will be at 100%. Other than that, it also contains the general fund entire contingency and reserves. So the real operations in there are very small. There's just a few actuals that hit that account other than those transfers. So I can research that and get you more detailed numbers if you'd like. Okay.
Yeah, if there's any like clear answers as to just the difference there, but I mean, I think I'm starting to understand based on your answer.
Okay.
James, I have a question about the street light.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to the power bill, I don't see that going down in the future. So will we just budget correctly next time or budget differently?
I did raise the budget for next year. This one, I'm still trying to figure it out how they charge it, because I'd assumed it was just electricity to run the lights, but it's different than that.
Mm-hmm.
There's a monthly fee for these lights as well as the electricity costs, I believe. So it is something that I'm looking into. I can let you know because I'm curious myself.
Yeah, the reason why I'm asking is because there is, I think on the books, an ability for the city to pass that on to the ratepayers, those residents, and I'm not an advocate of that. I'm just curious. I've asked that question for a long time, and in what capacity does that fund or that ability to sit there to support the lights, and what does it support? So to your point, a little bit more clarity on how that is would be good.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I think James probably already knows, but I think Pacific Power is asking for another rate increase for next year also, another like 17%,
Yep.
like that, so
Yep.
gouging us.
Yeah, we did increase budgets for electricity next year, not knowing exactly what the increase would be or when it would be, but yeah, we've increased that higher than the normal categories.
Anything else, Council? Julia? Communication from city staff?
I've got a few, not too many. You've got your budgets handed out to you this evening, so I just want to make sure you guys know that. I also wanted to just mention and see if there's any grave thoughts or concerns, or not grave, wonderful thoughts or concerns. The Teen Center is doing their golf tournament, and we have some funds available for sponsorships, and I think we still have some funds available, and so I was thinking about having the city sponsor a hole or a team, and just wanted to see if there was any concerns about doing that.
I'll just say that that golf tournament's their largest fundraiser. That's where they get a majority of the money to feed those kids and entertain the kids. So volunteering there, I will tell you, they can eat a lot of food. They go through a lot of food.
So I'll let you know if I just didn't, because it's sort of, I mean, we're partners, I guess, in that we allow them to be on the park property for a low fee, but I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something I'm not thinking about as I'm looking at doing that as a sponsorship. And I will make sure that we have ample money. We'll double check the budget, but I just wanted to put that out there. And then last, I just wanted to invite Chief Johns up. She's been doing quite a bit of work recently at the plaza and just sort of dealing with some other issues. And I know she shared some stuff with the mayor earlier today, and we thought it might be good for her to share it with the rest of council.
Thank you. So first, a couple fun announcements. Coffee with Cops on Monday, and it does start at 7:30 in the morning, but it's drop-in. So if someone showed up at 8:45, we're still going to provide coffee and conversation. So the idea is to come chat with us about whether it's concerns or issues or questions. Last time there were questions about the roundabout. That was a big one. Speed on Shaft, and then a lot of just conversations and get to know the police officers as people and community members. So it's a lot of fun. It's on Monday. We put out announcements for Safety Town, and right now we're recruiting youth counselors. So we do have professionals that come in and do the safety lessons. Fire department, police department, our dispatchers are going to get involved. The head lifeguard at the pool, et cetera. But we need middle school and high school aged counselors that help interact with the little campers and get them to where they're supposed to and help reinforce the safety lessons. So it's super cool. When I ran this camp previously at my old jurisdiction, we had people that volunteered middle school, high school, and one gal into college. So it is really impactful to our counselors as much as the campers. And then I just wanted to say Sergeant Bielenberg's been away all last week and then this week at a sergeant academy. We chose to send her to a metro area academy, which is a little ways, so she's had really long days and a really long last week. Then got a SWAT call out on Saturday at 1 in the morning. So she's been working super hard, but the academy is super beneficial. One of the really neat things they do, I think they did today, is they pull out the sergeants that are attending and they pair them up with a mentor supervisor from another agency that's been in the same role for a few years and do like lessons learned and what I wish I knew or things I've learned, and it's a great way for them to walk away with some built-in mentors already. And then Sergeant Meeks and I'll attend on Friday and be role players in the scenarios that they put them into. So they go through 6 different scenarios. I believe one's like this is a disciplinary issue that you have to address, and they have to actually work through it. A couple are tactical, but just a pretty neat opportunity. As Julia mentioned, we have been dealing with issues presented at the plaza in regards to loitering and some homeless issues. So I personally have engaged today with the property manager, the property owner. The sergeants have talked with a couple of the business owners, and then personally, I went out with officers today to check the property because of a couple specific complaints. So it's helpful to me when I can get eyes on it and see what the actual issue is. So a couple of the complaints have been concerns about people either staying there after hours, maybe camping or loitering. And a couple of the issues that are presented, it's a large plaza. So just like, let's say we went to Oak Park Estates, right? You've got a park and multiple residents there. So if I lived in number 1 and the person in number 3 didn't like who I had at my place, they can't trespass the person from my place. I could, or the overall park manager could get involved, but it's my place. So same at a at the plaza, there's individual businesses, and the individual business has a right or authority over their business. So if they chose to trespass someone from their business, they can do that. But they can't say, well, I don't want them to go to the other business down here, or I don't want them on the whole property. But they could get their manager or owner involved, and they could. So there's been some misunderstandings with that. And what we're finding too is there's actually been very specific examples where a business wanted a person trespassed, and in fact that person had permission from another business. And in one case, the person was actually doing contract work at another business on the property, but this other person wanted him trespassed. So we're just trying to coordinate, you know, and make sure that things are done appropriately and we're following the right things. Today we did find a camp had got set up behind in the bushes. So we notified the property manager. That's his job. It's private property to come in and take care of that. And then it was unoccupied. We advised that if there's a problem, there's actual person for us to trespass, we're happy to come back and assist. But now that we found the camp and notified, that's property. It wasn't significant, but it was obvious someone was staying there. So I mention these things because sometimes there's misunderstandings on what can happen, what should happen. And even though maybe the resolution isn't immediate for some, we do work through the problem and make sure that we maybe have a long-term resolution that we're working towards. And I would just say another example we had out there, and I had actually responded on the call, was someone was pointing out all the cars that they wanted removed because they didn't think they should be there. And in fact, one person was employee of one of the places just on her break on her phone sitting in her car. So it's hard to just go in and say, you know, this person doesn't look like they should be here and this person should get moved along. So we want to make it based on someone's actual authority that they can have someone moved along. And then lastly, I just wanted to bring to your attention that we're pretty excited. We're moving forward with the accreditation process. And this is something that I know Chief Friesendahl really wanted to accomplish. It is a lift. I know he had got going on it, and we had a lot of other things like wildfires and things that happened that kind of got in the way. I did have a unique opportunity that kind of became my motivation. A retired command staff from another agency who's been through the accreditation process is assisting us in being an accreditation manager. And what that means is he kind of knows the language of stuff and how things fit into the process and the systems, because we have to upload stuff into the management system. And so one, it's taking some lift off of the agency to some degree, but also that knowledge and experience. But it's giving me a motivation. I've committed to this and we're doing it, and I've found grant money that will cover that contract, as well as I've worked with the Accreditation Alliance and the other system that we need for some forgiveness on some fees. So I've looked for ways to also make it not be so costly to us. And the reason that accreditation is important, it provides independent confirmation that policies are complying with our professional standards, provides greater administration operational effectiveness, ensures continuous self-assessment of the policies, procedures, and then just decreases exposure to civil liability, provides state and local acknowledgement of professional competencies. So we can say we're doing all these things, but through accreditation, someone else is saying, yes, you are. So of the 174 law enforcement agencies in Oregon, there's about 75, so less than half, that are participating in an accreditation alliance. Some are in the self-assessment phase where we are, and then others are already fully accredited. So it's a heavy lift, but we're excited about it. We think it's very important. It adds a level of professionalism. It's a great measure of performance and accountability. And then it also shows that best practice. And it's looking at standards. Like we have to go in and provide a proof to say we've met this standard. So it just gives a little bit of more, I guess, credence that we're doing what we say we're doing, and accountability as well. Questions?
Chief, sorry, I was just going to have you add, right now, it's us doing it is voluntary.
Correct.
But the estimate is that it won't be in the long
Correct.
term.
So, yeah, based on the size of our agency, we're not under a mandate to do it currently, but it's expected, in future years that our size agency would be mandated. So we're getting ahead of it, but we also recognize that, it could draw people that want to work for accredited agency. And, it's just something that gives us a little more edge.
Chief, thanks for doing that. I've been asking for accreditation for 10 years, so I appreciate you seeing that through, taking the inspiration to lead that, and that's it does mean a lot to what you just said. All the reasons why you explained it's important is definitely, in my experience, really important. So I appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your communication with me today. That was fantastic.
You're welcome.
Really, you guys, the complexity of what the chief's dealing with, in specific to the plaza, there's multifaceted layers of it. And to Chief's point about what you just described, it was fantastic communication with me today. So I can take that and turn and educate the folks that are making those complaints, essentially. I knew there was a challenge when it comes to the private property. I didn't know to what extent the plaza presented. So thank you for doing that.
You're
It's
welcome.
great communication.
Mr. Mayor?
Julio.
Yes, I want to thank you as well for this update. I did have a few questions, and I actually don't mean them to be kind of out of the blue because I've been meaning to kind of ask them other ways, but I've just been so busy with the budget and all this stuff I haven't. So these aren't meant to be any type of, these are just more honestly like curious questions that I have. The first I had was just an update on how to police just parked cars, especially I think about in the downtown core. It feels like I've been noticing some more like just in areas that I would just say feel like have been parked for a while and are in the same spot again and again. What I would say is, do you feel like the ordinances we have in place are sufficient for being able to actually have cars move along? Or do we feel like there's maybe a more aggressive approach that's needed? So let's say, like, for example, how many cars are you able to ask to move along based on duration of time that they're in a spot?
Yeah, so I would say it's a little bit complicated question. So we are largely complaint-driven on stuff like that, meaning someone needs to notice the problem and tell us about it and we address it. Because obviously if it's in your neighborhood, in front of your house, it's a little more personal, you notice it. Whereas I might drive by it, but I might not know it sat there for 5 days or 3 weeks, or there's obvious ones. There's ones that we address, and actually my staff has been doing a really good job. I asked my graveyard guys to address parking and abandoned vehicle issues. I actually just talked to Julie about it, that I did a search and unfortunately we were listing them under ordinance, so it was hard for me to find. And so I was having to open each and every CAD to look at it and see if it was actually abandoned. But we do self-initiated, but obviously if it's personal in someone's neighborhood, in front of their business, it's helpful to us that we get the attention, the attention's drawn to it by someone. And we have a lot going on, so an abandoned or parking might not rise, right, to the height of addressing without it being brought to our attention. So what happens is if it's sat for, we have to show that it has sat for 72 hours without moving, and sometimes that can be a challenge depending. We have seen where someone works a graveyard shift and it sits there all day, and so the neighbor sees it sitting there all day, they go to bed and don't realize it's moved because the person's working graveyard shift. And so what we will do is kind of check it at different times. There's legislation on not being able to mark tires with chalk anymore, so we have to be creative about how we check that. There's digital odometers now, so you can't just look in the window and check the odometer anymore. So we have to, again, show it's sat for 72 hours, then we place a tag on it to give them an opportunity to comply. I would say more times than not, people comply and move it. Sometimes we've had people say, I am super sick, I've not left the house, I see the orange tag, I will get it moved. We've had people deployed where, you know, the parent said, yeah, I'll get it moved off the street, sorry, my son's deployed in the military. So we try to be reasonable and we try to provide grace. We don't want to take someone's car, we just want it to move. And then in addition, to answer your question, in particular, I'll say I know of one that we've been giving pretty much daily attention to. He is complying by what our ordinance says, and in fact, so much so that he made sure he wanted everyone to know he moved his car and drove around town honking his horn. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, and Chief and I have talked a little bit about that with, especially that particular person, where it's clear that they're, you know, they're camping in their car, they're moving their car, they're abiding by the 72-hour ordinance. And so I want to get a conversation going with Ross to see if there are other avenues to kind of address it or not. So we haven't had that conversation yet, but it's definitely it is follow, you know, the camping, and they're, you know, they're meeting the letter of the law but not the intent of the law, and so we need to figure out what our options are.
Yeah. No, I think that's, thank you. I think that's helpful. That's actually exactly what I was thinking about, is just to have another conversation just about the car camping piece. Feels like of all the pieces, that's the one that, of that kind of conversation, still feels like it's a little harder to.
So on that note, I just wanted to mention the mayor and chief and I and Kim Dwyer just met last week. Yeah, I guess it was last week. Today's Monday, with some folks from the Recovery Outreach Community Center to kind of talk about, you know, how they might be able to come in and help a little bit more, interact with these individuals. Especially, it was primarily focused on the park and ride, but in general. And one of the things that they said is, and I think, you know, we're seeing, and certainly Chief is seeing, is that as the weather warms, you know, you start to see people moving further away from like the resources and kind of out a little bit more. So I think that it's something that we're seeing now as they don't need to be quite so close to warming centers and things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, one note on that is I did listen to the Supreme Court case on it, which was, it may be a moot point in Oregon, but it does seem very likely that that will be, that all of the court cases around it will be changed relatively quickly based on what the justices were saying. Then the other question I had, and this is a really small question, but it's a question I had last year, and I'm just kind of circling back around to it, and I noticed it in the presentation, the community forum, was just the traffic stop numbers, because I know that I think this would have been under Chief Stevens, yeah, sorry. Chief Stevens' tenure, the last year of his tenure, it was at 3,000 ticketing, I believe. And then under Friesendahl, it went down, I think, to 1,400 the next year, and we're still at that rate. And I know that the question, I think the answer was initially COVID-related was kind of the answer. And so I'm just wondering if, like if I was to look at it in paper, it seems hard to think that there's not like a policy. Like I know that there's got to be some manpower restrictions, but I'm wondering if there are any like specific policy restrictions or things like that that are contributing to that decline in ticketing as well? Or would you say it's primarily just manpower?
No, I mean, there's no policy restricting it. The requirement is if they're not on calls for service or writing reports or doing investigation, then they should be active in some way. That might be checking the parks. It might be driving through the plaza and, you know, seeing that there's compliance with the issues that are going on there. So whether they're checking the hospital or the post office after hours or doing parking or abandoned vehicles, that somehow they're addressing community issues. And so I do think that sometimes the community issues change. So for, you know, quite a while, the camping stuff was taking up time. Hiking into Riverfront Park and, you know, walking the trails takes a significant amount of time away from being on patrol and doing traffic enforcement. So I think that the guys understand and know, and especially days when I go out and do some stops myself, they're like, oh, the chief's out running traffic. I need to get out there. We are filling our days. We're busy and active. You know, today in just our little community, started in Almsville, ended up in a pursuit with OSP and on up into Wilsonville. Turner had a small, like, half SWAT call out on an incident they had there. So our small communities do see big events that take up our time. So it's not for a lack of wanting to or urging to, and it is something that we've been focusing on. We've been spending more time on the grants and doing that, but we also still have 2 guys that are in training, so I'm hoping late spring, early summer, we see those 2 more bodies being able to produce some more traffic enforcement.
And Chief, you and I have talked a lot about the numbers and what different numbers mean. And I guess 2 things I just want to highlight, and I don't know if the reporting requirement was as strict as it is now when Chief Siebens was here, but I know that your officers have a lot of, you know, the reports take a lot of time too. But also you've mentioned before that a ticket isn't necessarily 1 ticket. It might be 3 citations, and depending on how it was reported in the past, you know, I think you haven't been able to sort of like go back in time and see how they reported their numbers
Right.
Back then versus how you guys do that now. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, stats are always, you have to be careful with stats. Stats can tell you great things, and stats can also, you know, look different depending how you count it or what you look at. So a ticket, a piece of paper that we hand to a violator is a ticket. And some agencies count a ticket as a ticket, but a ticket holds 3 charges. So sometimes you'll see where that counts as 3 tickets. So it really depends how stats are collected and maintained. So, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn because I haven't looked at it recently. I believe a piece of paper is a ticket. So it's just something to be mindful of, you know, so that's why I started kind of looking at how many violations, and that's now on our reporting to be a little more accurate and a little more transparent with that. So again, it's how stats are recorded and how they're looked at and what's actually being measured.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think to me, I'm just trying to find some stats that are able to compare like previous versus the current, right? And trying to get as much in terms of like just like timeline data, which I feel like tells a little bit more like holistic story as like how we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's just what I'm kind of struggling with, and so yeah, just looking at more like the holistic, like long term, like where we're going,
Yeah.
how we're doing,
For
that
sure.
kind of a thing. And so yeah, I'm open to ideas on how to on just more that holistic, taking a look at that. But I think that's where it was getting to. I think those are good questions. I mean, there's some good answers, and we can just follow up and we have some conversations
Yeah, and
around.
like Julia was mentioning too, so a traffic stop for us anymore, really, we want something documented on piece of paper, whether it's a warning or a ticket. And so that takes time. And then after we do this stop, we have to get into our stop database and document, right? Like, what was the race of the violator? Did you know the race before you stopped the car? And so there's this whole tracking system that we've got to show, you know, bias-based policing and tracking all that. So there are a lot of demands on us that years and years ago, when I first started as a police officer, you just went out, turned on the lights, and stopped people, right?
Yeah.
But now there are a lot more requirements of tracking and documentation and follow-up. So sometimes that adds to the clog of stuff, unfortunately.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chief, so going back to that 72-hour rule,
Yes.
I'm sorry I didn't give you this question ahead of time, but I've just been
You're
kind of
fine.
thinking about it. Now, we've had some discussions about the dog park. The parking lot there, is that the 72-hour rule apply to that parking lot? Or is that part of the park itself?
That may be a very specific question that just came up today. So I had to get a hold of Jennifer and verify the parking lot that actually faces the street
Fourth?
is parking lot, right, Fourth. In would be the park, you know, down the driveway is park, but
Right.
on Fourth is actually city street. So we were looking at, there's a truck or
Yeah, the red
SUV
Dodge.
parked
Yeah.
right there. It's been assigned to my graveyard guy, so he'll look at it as abandoned. If it was in the park and he was camping, right, we could do a park exclusion, but it is a city street.
So that parking lot is included with a 72-hour rule?
Yeah.
And
Correct.
that's what applies? Because is that something that could be encompassed within the park boundaries itself, that parking lot? Or, I think that's probably a question for Julia.
It's right-of-way. I think that's the issue. It's right-of-way. So it's not a parking lot per se, even though that's the way people park. I believe it's actually within the right-of-way. So, and I know the mayor kind of indicated a desire to look at that a little bit more. I mean, there's things that we could do. We could sign it no parking or limited number of, you know, parking or something like that. So there's things that could potentially be done in that area if we wanted to. That comes with, you know, enforcement and all sorts of things.
Right.
So that's certainly something
But we could do
that could
a
be discussed.
park, like a 3-hour time limit or something.
Potentially.
You know, maybe not that, but a
Yeah.
time limit sign that we could put in that parking area. That's something
On
that's
the,
possible.
essentially, you're putting it on the street. You're saying between this block, you know, you're limited to so many, you know, to,
Well, however many
Yeah.
hours. But that, since it's a right-of-way, it can be part of the park, because
Right.
what is there, I don't know what, I think the park closes at 10 or whatever it closes at,
Right.
not sure.
Yeah, and our officers have been really good about the park hours now that we have clear direction. They've been doing a really good job of addressing that.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Thank you.
I'm just concerned about long-term parking in that parking lot around the dog park and, you know, people trying to take their dogs there.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Giulio.
That just reminded me of one other question, which has to do with the public comment that we had about a 3-hour time limit. I do tend to agree with what he is saying. I have seen that as well, that it feels like as downtown grows, this seems to be an issue that we're going to need to address at some point. And I'm wondering, and I know that in our last discussion that we had around hospital parking, this was a bit of a concern in terms of like from an enforcement perspective. What are your thoughts in terms of having some sort of time limit near parks, or having some sort of, especially in the downtown core in particular, having some ability to restrict those hours, or from an enforcement perspective? Or if there's
So I
creative enforcement?
had put some good thought into it and put some notes, so I probably would want to reflect on that some more, but just off the cuff. One, like just as a private citizen, it's hard to do dinner and a movie in 3 hours, or if you want to come downtown and stroll the downtown and enjoy all the stores that are downtown. I think if you're limiting people to 2 hours, right, you're kind of pushing them along, when I think we're trying to welcome people to our city and enjoy our nice downtown. So I guess it depends what we're trying to accomplish with it, and with every restriction becomes, right, there's some other downside to it. So we have downtown residents. That's the other thing that I think we would be hard pressed. We've got apartments and residents downtown, and to tell a person that rents that they can't park for more than a couple hours, I sure wouldn't want to move my own personal car from in front of my residence every couple hours. So there's things that we would want to look at for sure, to make sure that we're not being short-sighted about it.
And I expected that to come up, and one of the things I would certainly recommend, and I've told RDS this as well, that I think if the council wants to explore that concept, I think we need to explore it at a little more than just, let's just do it. I think we need to send out notice to all the property owners and residents, because I don't know that they speak for, the RDS speaks for all of the businesses, and say, this is what we're thinking about doing, this has been requested, what are your thoughts? It could be, one of the things I've heard from Adam is, especially is Third, we're not concerned about these side streets, but other people may be concerned about the side streets, especially if you're limiting it on Third. And so really making sure that we're looking at it holistically and not just responding, knee-jerk. We want to look at the whole picture. And maybe there's some areas where it's limited for, shorter periods of time, but not the entire way or something like that, based on the feedback. And then the enforcement piece comes in, and I think we'd have to talk about the expectations for that. But if we're giving lots of tickets, we could get lots of revenue. And
Well, and I think the other piece too is, like, I see a lot of store employees that are parking, or city, people that work in the downtown area that are parking on the street. So again, are we causing them on their lunch break to have to go move their car to be in compliance? And I will say, like, part of it is that question of, we want growth, but growth brings traffic and people. And so, like, with the bakery, that's an amazing business for us downtown, but you do see a lot more parking, like that public parking back there. You go to court and it's pretty full, but it's an amazing business that draws a lot of people to our town. So, right, we want a bustling downtown. With that comes some parking.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to look at that holistically later at a different time. I mean, yeah. Anything else for Chief? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Julie, anything else?
Nope, that's all.
Council? Anything?
Mr. Mayor?
Council Hort?
Just to kind of piggyback off that, my thought was, with that conversation, if we could kind of look at if there are some areas that would benefit from like a 15 or a 30-minute, maybe just a couple down the road, if that, or down the street, if that makes any difference, for people who just need to get in and out, or to kind of clear up some of those spots. I'd be interested in looking at that.
Yep.
And then it made me think of the parking lot. So RDS wanted to fix up that parking lot. Then we said, hey, that's something that we should be taking on. So like, if we can kind of revamp that parking lot so that it's, a great place for people to park.
So you clearly didn't read your weekly update a few weeks ago. I'm just,
well, maybe
I'm just kidding.
Well, some of them
No, I'm just kidding. I'm
maybe
giving
just scan.
So we actually, we did it already. We had talked about putting it in the budget. I mean, not to say that there isn't something grander that can happen in that parking lot, but when we were looking at that and what was quoted, and we're looking at our budget, and we're like, we can afford this in this year's budget. And so we basically, they're not granted that money, but we will reimburse them for that work out of, I can't remember what fund, but James said it was okay. I can't remember. Anyways, it's done, basically. And it was really just fixing some potholes and redoing some stuff. But that said, I think there could be more opportunities to do a little bit, some different things in that parking lot over time, too.
Maybe like a education piece on that it's there, because some people might not even know that it is a public parking lot.
Yeah, definitely. And I know with the Ida Street project, I think we're working on, or are trying to get some maps or some information on public parking spaces, because when the Ida Street project starts, it's going to limit parking on Ida Street, and so we're wanting to get word out to those businesses to be able to share with their patrons of kind of where public parking is. But yes, I think we could, that's something that we could do a little bit better too. But again, I feel like that's parking downtown is a more, like, just a more holistic conversation, or comprehensive conversation, because maybe every block has a 15-minute parking spot. Maybe every block has a 30-minute parking spot. Maybe rather, those are the types of things that we need to get input from businesses and frankly, patrons, of like what would work best. What do you want?
Julia, last meeting I asked about the Charter Review Committee being on the agenda. Is there an update on that yet?
Yes. You clearly don't look at your weekly updates either. I'm sorry. If you look at the agenda forecast on June 26th, there's a work session scheduled with Ross to talk about that.
Good. Thank you. Maybe I didn't see that. Some of us do have lives outside of the city.
I know. Well, yeah, maybe.
Anything else, folks?
I've read every one. I'm just kidding. That's not true.
If there's nothing else, we will adjourn tonight.
Next week, there's going to be quizzes on that.
Thank you.